Oh boy, I can't wait until next year when I can do a sequel to this video. The word sequel is a term that can have people expressing a variety of emotions and reactions, rightfully so. Unless you're a CEO, I think their eyes just turn to dollar signs whenever they hear that word. Much like our own government, there are many emotions being had over there. I feel like every year we are advertised to go and watch so many sequels that people begin to hate sequels in general, and I don't blame them. I remember back in the day when I'd get my hands on those direct-to-DVD sequels, and I'd treat them like I had just found the Omnitrix from Ben 10. I didn't care if half the cast didn't reprise their roles. I didn't care if the movie was bad. I was just glad we got to see those same characters one more time. Yeah, I'm not a kid anymore. That stuff's trash.
That's right, keep moving! You know what? You know what? Yeah. Except you stay.
I'll be straight up. The issue with sequels right now is that we get them for anything and everything. You can say this issue has been around for a long time, but I'd say it's as prevalent as ever in this era of remakes and nostalgia bait we're in. It's like, hey, remember that movie that did pretty well a couple decades ago? Yeah, let's do a sequel to that one. They'll never see it coming. I feel like this is its own genre of sequels now because they're making sequels to old movies that we don't even really care about. Speak for yourself. I can't wait for the sequel to The Good Dinosaur. There's no point in these sequels other than money. You can say that's obvious, and that's the case with basically every sequel ever, but man, some sequels are the most enjoyable movies I've ever watched because they were made with a purpose to respect and add on to what the original laid out for them. Spider-Man 2 and Shrek 2 are the first examples that come to my mind when I think about fantastic follow-ups to a movie. These are textbook definitions of an amazing sequel. They advance the story, but in a way that serves to expand the characters in a way that actually makes sense. I don't know about you guys, but I hate it when we get those sequels and it's like their sole purpose is to assassinate any character development that happened in the last movie. A great sequel will always stay true to the characters and present new problems that actually mean something. How many times have you seen a sequel to a movie and they create these high stakes for the sake of creating high stakes? I understand wanting to do more, but if you're doing a disservice to the foundation that was made in the last movie, then these stakes will feel meaningless. They won't feel genuine. The stakes created in Spider-Man 2 and Shrek 2 sound a bit far-fetched at first. Like in Spider-Man 2, the stakes are Peter Parker is having a midlife crisis, which leads to him losing his powers to be Spider-Man, and in wake of that, we're introduced to Doc Ock, who could quite literally end up destroying the whole world with his invention. Oh, and he captures MJ. That's pretty important too. Meanwhile, in Shrek 2, you have the crew trying to stop Prince Charming from kissing Fiona, or it's GG's. These stakes work so well because of how they're presented, how they're executed, and because of the arcs specific characters go on. Most notably, our protagonists of the stories. Starting off with the OG Spider-Man, you have Peter Parker, who is a nerd and gets picked on non-stop. This movie is a coming-of-age story where we get to see Peter Parker get these superpowers after being bit by a radioactive spider and have to navigate how and when he should use them. Hey, maybe there could be an iconic phrase that can help him with that. Throughout the movie, we get to see Peter Parker learn the great responsibilities that come with this newfound power and how these responsibilities require a lot of determination and time. This leads to him realizing that some things are just off the table for him, including him having a potential relationship. Because who is he? Spider-Man.
A Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins away.
Following that up is a movie that begins with our protagonist struggling to balance the responsibilities of being Spider-Man as well as the responsibilities of the civilian Peter Parker. Are you struggling to be on time? Struggling to hold a job? Struggling to have a pinch of romance in your life? Struggling to remember your own birthday? Welcome to your early 20s.
You serious?
Peter gets to see a person who he loved and had the opportunity to go out with, get engaged to someone else, all because of the time he has to spend as someone who gets vilified in the newspaper. All of these struggles culminate in Peter having an identity crisis, and that reveals itself as he begins to lose his powers. Powers that maybe the world was better off without to begin with. This is a movie dedicated to Peter Parker finding out who he is, and it's done in such a brilliant way. The first movie was about Uncle Ben teaching Peter that with great power comes great responsibility. And in this follow-up film, we get to see Aunt May give advice to Peter on how sometimes, to do what is right, we must give up what we want the most, even our dreams. This movie does about everything you could ever ask for when it comes to a sequel, and that's why it will always hold a special place in my heart.
Somebody.
Then you have Shrek. Shrek 2 is a perfect, flawless follow-up to the first movie. What exactly happens in the first movie? Well, the first movie follows the life of Shrek and opens up the curtain on his life, showing us how he's hated by every single person and that he's content with this. Or maybe that's what he was telling himself and us, the audience. Because as he befriends someone named Donkey, we really get to see the layers
Ogres have layers. Onions have layers.
Say that again?
behind his character and how he truly feels. After his encounter with Fiona, someone he shares a lot in common with, he begins to feel that maybe he is worth more than being scorned his entire life. The movie ends with him having this happily ever after where he gets with Fiona and has a best friend too. Then we have the sequel. In this sequel, we are shown that even though Shrek opened up to Donkey and Fiona, there are still those who will never be open to lending an ear to begin with. Still despised by many, including the king, who is Fiona's dad, Shrek wallows in insecurity, in which, how could you blame him? He has achieved something that he never thought he could, and with the way all of these other people react to his success, he feels undeserving of what he's achieved. This leads to Shrek going on a journey to become the person he believes the people want and his wife deserves. Along this journey, we find out about this evil ploy that the fairy godmother has schemed up that will lead to Fiona falling in love with Prince Charming forever. All that needs to be done to seal that reality is a kiss. You see, your son, Prince Charming, was the original person that was supposed to save Fiona from the castle guarded by a dragon. That's how the fairy tale went. Then that stupid, ugly ogre had to go and screw it all up, which leads to the stakes of this movie. Shrek is eventually able to become content with who he is because even though he wasn't the charming prince Fiona had always imagined would sweep her off her feet, he realizes that she fell in love with him for who he is and he fell in love with her for who she is. They love each other and that's greater than anything looks can offer. Shrek ultimately clutches up in one of the greatest scenes and interpretations of a song ever, and yeah! That's the movie. The reason I had to speak about these sequels is because they are so rare. A great sequel also tends to get another sequel. What were the sequels to these movies again? Oh yeah, they didn't get any. These sequels can be planned and that's fair, but there are certain franchises that get sequels like it's a money laundering scheme. Ice Age is the OG at this. Rest in Paradise King, because a franchise getting a plethora of sequels just dilutes the quality of the franchise if there was any quality to begin with, because no way can you go 100 for 100 on sequels. That is impossible. They also tire people on the brand to begin with. The Toy Story franchise is very, very solid. At the same time, there is no need for a fourth and soon to be fifth movie. The fourth one was good, and you'll have to assume the fifth would be great as well, but the first three were fantastic. The franchise had its trilogy with all three being amazing, and it ended with one of the most emotional moments in a movie period. I remember watching Toy Story 3 in the theaters as a kid, and there were so many sniffles during the final act of that movie. It was a great way to put a bow on the franchise that proved so many people wrong. Then they wanted to make more money. There is a certain cinematic universe dealing with that issue right now. Superhero fatigue? Nah, we're just on that bad movie fatigue. It's also hard to blame the sequels themselves when I bet there's so much that happens behind the scenes that we don't know about. We all know those greedy companies and executives like to change things to sell more and market this and that just leads to a messy, not so good movie. Spider-Man 3. Enough said. This is probably the point in the video where I should mention how Hollywood is addicted to IPs and how they basically become a must-have when it comes to making these blockbuster movies that Hollywood always wants to make. How many movies over the past decade have been on video games, books, comics, board games? I don't see any of that stopping anytime soon. Just like The Rock pissing in bottles on set, it's inevitable, unfortunately. Sequels are everywhere and I don't see that changing ever. However, good and bad sequels are like good and bad video games. Both exist, both are out there. It's up to us to decide what is what. There's also a lot of original films being made every year too. As much as the streaming era is to blame for the quality and success for certain films, it has also been helpful in some circumstances with giving us the opportunity to see more films we probably wouldn't have ever seen otherwise. Again, there are definite drawbacks to the streaming era we are currently in, but I have to be honest, it helps sometimes. Then other times it gives us this. Like I said earlier, in my direct-to-DVD era as a kid, I loved a lot of sequels no matter what because I loved getting to see what the characters were up to since the events of the last time we saw them. Nowadays, I definitely prefer getting a conclusion and leaving it at that. Like with a lot of you, I am always conflicted when we hear about a movie or whatever getting a sequel that has the chance to be cool, but an equal chance to be trash. Sequels may be everywhere, but what isn't everywhere are the feelings and emotions we had when we saw that original movie, and no bad sequel can ever take that away. If there's a sequel and it ends up being great, amazing! If there's a sequel and it ends up being Shrek the Third, then let's just pretend it never happened. What are your thoughts on sequels though? Let me know down below. What are your favorites? Which ones do you hate? While you're at it, you should also like the video and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it, because who knows, maybe by the time you finish watching this video, they've already announced 8 more sequels to decade-old movies. Are we in the worst timeline?
It all started this morning when Jake made a sign that said,
Oh, I don't care.